That woman was alone there, and regardless of race, I mean, even if my wife had been white, he would have done that. So that's but one experience that daughter sitting here as well. Let's see what she has to say about this.
I was sitting beside my mom, and old man was sitting here, and tell your daughter. Then my mom said,
how would you describe to somebody if that behavior was intentional or that was a mistake? Today I'm going to talk about racism in Canada, whether I have experienced racism in my 1.5 year of stay as a new permanent resident in Canada or not, and what shape or forms have I experienced it, if ever or any. These are very valuable insights, will help you prepare for your life in Canada if you are planning to come to Canada as a permanent resident or on a work visa or student visa. First, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to Honest Reviews Canada. So let's start the video. Talking about racism, I guess whether you feel there is racism in a country or not has a lot to do with how sensitive you are as well, because it's a subjective thing, it's a subjective term, it's a subjective feeling. Two people having a same bad experience will describe it differently. One person will not feel good about it, the other might just feel the thing is too trivial to talk about, so they'd probably just brush it off their shoulders. First of all, you have to understand that good and bad people are everywhere. No matter how strict the rules, laws, or regulations are, you always find people breaking that rule. You'll always find people doing their own thing, thus making you feel uncomfortable. I believe in my 1.5 year of stay in Canada, overall, I have found that the vibe in this country and the laws and regulations have been framed and structured in a way as to discourage people from displaying any form of racism or discrimination against the newcomers, against anybody. There's absolutely zero acceptance for racism or discrimination in any shape or form. But yes, still people do display it sometimes. And when that happens, it is so difficult to catch or maintain the evidence so as to report that incident anywhere that has made you feel uncomfortable. In this video, I'm going to share 2 to 3 instances where we have personally felt racism in Canada. And let us tell you that we are very forgiving and very relaxed in this aspect. As I've already shared with you, I do understand that bad people are everywhere, so things are going to happen. So we don't take things too seriously or don't stretch it to a tangent whenever we feel they've happened. But yes, what has happened, I will definitely share with you. Incident number 1. There was one instance when my wife was waiting for a public bus and she was sitting with my daughter at a bus stop. She had come right outside the hospital and we didn't used to have the car at that time. At that time, my wife had decided to use public bus transit service. As she was waiting in the bus stop, a white man came, somewhere around 55 to 60 years old. He was smoking a cigarette and he threw the butt right next to her foot. At that time, my wife and my daughter were the only people sitting inside that booth, and that white man had come there and he was smoking and he just carelessly threw the butt. Now, it's a subjective thing. How would you describe to somebody if that behavior was intentional or that was a mistake by him? Because if raised to somebody's attention and if we are both explaining our stories, he might just say, oh, it was an accident, I never meant to do that. So things like this are very hard to prove. But I mean, the person who that happens to can tell if that was intentional or not, because the verbal communication between two people is one thing, but coordination and communication happens at other levels as well. There's body language involved, there's energies, there's vibes that you get from people. At that time, my wife did sense that it was purposeful, it was intentional, and she was feeling helpless at that time because she had a young daughter to take care of as well, and there was absolutely nobody else. Everybody else was either driving the cars on the road or daughter sitting here as well. Let's see what she has to say about this. What had happened at that day when you were sitting with your mom in the bus stop booth?
the man was just walking around, and then just like this, I think they both started together. So they go here, and I was sitting with her in the bus stop, and blood go like here in my mom's foot. The man was just like this, and he was doing this with a bullet. Then she just threw it at my mom's foot.
So yes, she was with her mom at that time and I was not there. That was one incident. And what happened shortly thereafter was that 2 women came there, had just arrived at the spot in the wait of the bus. The person was kind of staring at my wife, as she told me. And when the other passengers came, I mean those 2 women, that was the time when that man went away. So that was definitely a very uncomfortable experience for her. I can't say whether that has to do anything with racism, whether that has to do something that we look brown, or if not brown, not as white people or the white race. Or maybe that just happened because he sensed that woman was alone there. And regardless of race, I mean, even if my wife had been white, he would have done that. So that's but one experience that made her feel uncomfortable. What else? So now the second incident, and that too happened in the bus. My wife was sitting with my daughters inside the bus, and this happened on another day. Old white men that we have had experiences with. I won't say all old white men are like that, but by coincidence in these 2 instances. So let us know what happened on that day when you were sitting with your mom inside the bus.
I was sitting down. I was saying, "Mommy, can you give me just a chip?" Then I say, whispered, and the old man saw me. Then he said to me.
Did he or he kind of screamed but not say?
It was like this. I was sitting beside my mom, and old man was sitting here, and then the man said, "Tell your daughter." Then my mom said, "No, she's just a kid."
So yeah, as you can see, I didn't make her say all this. This is something that she's recalling from her own memory, from the experience she's had sitting inside that bus with her mom. And that was the time also when my daughters and my wife were the only people sitting in that bus, because that's like the bus was at the bus stop and all of the passengers had to fill in, and my wife with my daughters was the first to sit in the bus. And that was a time when not a lot of people were around, because it happened somewhere around probably 10 o'clock or 10:30 something, when people are in their offices, students are in their colleges and campuses, and students are the bulk of the population that generally uses the bus. That was not a very rushy time. That's why my wife with my daughters was the first and the only person to be in the bus. Driver was not there at that time, because it takes time for like drivers to switch. One driver goes out and then the other one comes in, so it somewhat happens like that. So that was the time when this second passenger had walked in, and he walked pretty close to my wife, even though the whole bus was empty. But I guess he sat 1 or 2 seats ahead of them, and that was when he was sensing this noise pollution, when my daughter was asking my wife to give her chips or something like that, so he was not comfortable with it. So yeah, as my daughter has shared, my wife did say like she's just a kid and all, but I think like my wife told me, like, code, he said, well, you're the mom, you have to tell her to you have to keep her low. Whether this can be translated as racism or not, I think the opinion might vary person to person. And we can also understand that sometimes elderly people have a tendency to pick up on others because they themselves are easily agitated, worn down by health complications and illnesses. Sometimes they can already be dealing with so much that they can vent out on anybody unnecessarily. I think that's not nice behavior to display. That was a very, very uncomfortable experience, and that left my wife afraid and uncomfortable being alone. That should not happen. But again, as I said, I have nothing to say against the rules because they are there in place and everybody follows them. But things like this are subjective and difficult to raise to someone's attention as well. And even, like I said, two people being in the same situation would describe them differently because of difference in the level of their sensitivity and emotional response to crises. And now the third incident. All right, then at another event, what happened was, and this is pretty recent, this happened like this week. My wife was standing in a queue. So this was a grocery store, and I wouldn't say the name, because that grocery store has nothing to do with what happened there. But if name is said, then people have a tendency to just remember the name and just, have negative connotations attached to that name subconsciously. So I won't say the name. What was happening was that my wife wanted to return something, and there were two attendants, two people from the staff helping people with the returns, and people were standing in a queue. And what happens is that there's just one queue, and the last person in that queue is in the position of deciding whether he wants to go to staff A or staff B for help, depending on who is available first. My wife, coming from a different country, my wife just sensed, because this used to happen in our own country as well, that when there would be two staff members assisting people, there could be two queues. We understand that she stood behind the last person who the staff A was helping. She joined her at the back and sort of made two queues there. Now the last person standing there was a white man probably in his 40s, and he said, "Are you with her?" He asked my wife, "Are you with her?" With the lady who was standing in front of her, who the staff A was helping. And my wife said, "No, I'm not with her." So he said, "Oh, then you're supposed to be at the back." And he was right. There's nothing bad about it, nothing wrong in it. And my wife understood, okay, so there's got to be just one queue, and she's supposed to be at the back of that man. So my wife went there, stood behind him, and that was when the old lady in front of her, who she had previously stood behind, turned back and looked at that white man's face and said in a very low voice, "Oh, these Asians." My wife did hear that, but again, that was like kind of a whisper, as I say. Another person might not have even felt anything about it, but you can tell when things like this happen that some people are not comfortable with you being there. See, things like this happen. We are new here in this country, and we are also learning day by day. This was something that my wife learned, that there's got to be just one queue and you have to be at the back, and only the first person gets to decide who they want to get the help from. But that old lady turning back to that white man and saying, "These Asians," this was very unnecessary, and things like this should not happen. So viewers, this was the summary of 3 uncomfortable experiences my wife has had in Canada. Me personally, I can't recall anything except one instance that I would talk about in some other video. Let's keep these 3 experiences limited to my wife. So let me know if you have had any uncomfortable experiences in Canada, and if you would like to know what happened to me in another video, do comment below so I can share you my story. This will tell me that people are interested and want to hear about that, so I would share my insights further as well. Hope you enjoyed this video and would have taken some positive messages from it. Please comment below and give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to Honest Reviews Canada. See you in the next video with another exciting and informative topic. Until then, take care, have a nice day, and bye.